The scent of lavender and old books. That was the smell of my childhood, the very essence of my grandmother, Margaret. Her house wasn't just a house. It was a living museum of our family's history. A small, cozy bungalow, yes, but every inch of it was saturated with stories. The grandfather clock in the hall, its pendulum swinging in a slow, hypnotic rhythm, had been a wedding gift. The worn velvet armchair by the fireplace was where my grandfather used to sit, a pipe in his hand and a story on his lips. And the books. Oh, the books were everywhere. Stacked on shelves, piled on side tables, even tucked into corners. They were her escape, and she had passed that love of stories down to me, a legacy I cherished more than any physical heirloom. My son, Sam, felt the magic too. He'd sit at her feet for hours, cross-legged on the faded Persian rug, listening to her tales of the old days, of a world before television, of dances in village halls, of a handsome young soldier who would become his great-grandfather. Margaret was the sun around which our small family solar system orbited, the steady, gentle warmth that held us all together. After Grandpa passed, we all made a conscious effort to fill the void, to ensure the light in her house never dimmed. But life, with its relentless demands, has a way of pulling you away. My job as a librarian, while a passion, consumed my days, and Sam's school life was a whirlwind of projects and football practice. My visits, guiltily, became more and more confined to weekends. My sister, Megan, however, lived just a few blocks away. When Margaret had a small fall, tripping over the leg of a pesky garden gnome, and needed more consistent help, it was Megan who stepped in to take charge. On the surface, it was the perfect solution. Megan, an accountant by trade, was organized, efficient, and, as she often reminded me with a tight smile, much better with the practical side of things, Emily. She arrived one Saturday with a color-coded binder and spreadsheets, laying out a plan for Margaret's care that was both impressive and slightly intimidating. She took over managing Margaret's pension, arranging for direct debits to cover the bills, and doing her weekly grocery shopping. "Don't you worry your book-filled head about it," she'd said, patting my arm in a way that felt both reassuring and condescending. "I've got it all under control. You just focus on Sam and your stories." For a month or two, I was awash with gratitude. The weight of worry I hadn't even fully acknowledged was lifted. But then, like a discordant note in a familiar melody, small things started to feel wrong. A quiet unease began to curdle in my stomach. It started with Margaret, a woman who had stretched a pound until it screamed, mentioning that her money was running out faster than it used to. She'd say it with a puzzled frown, as if trying to solve a riddle. Then, when I brought her a small bouquet of her favorite freesias, she clutched them to her chest and whispered, "Oh, what a treat, dear. I can't seem to afford the little luxuries anymore." I did a quick mental calculation of her pension versus her modest, unchangeable expenses. It made no sense. When I broached the subject with Megan over the phone, her response was swift and sharp. "Honestly, Emily, you're worrying for nothing," she said, her voice laced with impatience. "She's 82. She forgets. Last week she told me she thought she'd paid the electric bill twice. Of course she hadn't. She probably bought a few extra things at the market or gave a 20-pound note to one of those donkey charities on the television. You know how soft-hearted she is." She painted a picture of me as the over-anxious, interfering daughter and of herself as the patient, put-upon saint. I backed down, a familiar wave of guilt washing over me. Megan was there, day in and day out. What right did I have to question her from the sidelines? But the feeling wouldn't go away. It was a splinter under the skin, a constant, low-level irritation. The breaking point arrived on a crisp autumn afternoon, the kind where the air smells of wood smoke and dying leaves. Sam had shot up over the summer, and his winter coat was comically short in the sleeves. I decided an outing would do Margaret good, and took her with us to a department store in the city center. The bright lights and festive displays seemed to lift her spirits. Sam, with the unerring instinct of a 10-year-old, found a navy blue parka with a furry hood that he instantly declared to be the coolest coat in the world. Margaret's face lit up, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "Oh, let me get that for him, Emily," she said, her voice full of that familiar, loving generosity. "A growing boy needs a proper warm coat for the winter." She shuffled in her handbag for her purse, a proud, happy smile on her face. It was the smile of a grandmother about to spoil her grandson, a simple act of love she had performed hundreds of times. Her fingers, gnarled with age but still surprisingly nimble, fumbled with the clasp of her worn leather handbag. She opened it, beaming, ready to bestow this gift. And then, the light in her eyes flickered and died. The smile froze on her lips, then slowly melted away, replaced by a look of utter bewilderment. I leaned over, pretending to admire the coat's lining, and glanced into her purse. It was almost cavernous in its emptiness. A single, crisp 5-pound note lay flat against the bottom, accompanied by a sad little jingle of loose change. The color drained from her face. She looked up at me, her blue eyes, usually so sharp and full of life, now clouded with a fog of confusion and shame. I don't understand," she whispered, the words barely audible above the store's cheerful music. "The pension. It just went in on Tuesday. Megan, she brought me the cash. She said it was all there." Her hand trembled as she closed the purse with a soft, final snap. It sounded like a door closing on her pride. My own heart felt like a block of ice in my chest. I quickly tapped my card on the machine, making a joke to Sam about how fast my money disappeared. But the image of my grandmother's face, so lost and humiliated in that bright, bustling store, was seared into my mind. On the drive home, she was unnervingly quiet, just staring out the window at the passing streets. And I knew, with a cold, terrifying certainty that coiled in the pit of my stomach, that this was not about forgetfulness. This was something much, much worse. The silence in the car on the way back to Margaret's was heavier than any argument. Sam, usually so chatty, seemed to sense the shift in the atmosphere and stayed quiet, fiddling with the toggles on his new coat. I kept glancing at my grandmother in the rearview mirror. She looked small, shrunken. The proud, matriarchal posture she always held was gone, replaced by a weary slump. When we pulled up to her bungalow, I walked her to the door. "Thank you for the coat, dear," she said, her voice thin as paper. She didn't meet my eyes. That was silly of me, getting so muddled. "It wasn't silly, Grandma," I said firmly, taking her hand. "It felt cold." "You're not muddled." She gave me a watery, non-committal smile and disappeared inside, closing the door with a soft click. I stood on the path for a long moment, the autumn air biting at my cheeks. The image of the empty purse, the single 5-pound note, was a declaration of war. My sister had drawn a line, and I knew I had to cross it. My anger was a hot, churning thing in my gut, but beneath it was a deep, aching sorrow. This wasn't just about money. It was about dignity. It was about the slow, cruel theft of my mother's independence and pride. I waited until Sam was in bed, the house quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. I rehearsed the conversation in my head a dozen times, trying to find a calm, non-accusatory opening. But when I dialed Megan's number and she answered with a breezy, "Hi, Em, what's up?" my carefully constructed composure crumbled. "I took Grandma shopping today, Megan," I said, my voice tighter than I intended. "Oh, lovely. Did you get anything nice?" "Sam a new coat. Grandma offered to pay for it." I paused, letting the silence hang in the air. "She opened her purse and she had 5 pounds in it, Megan. 5. 4 days after her pension went in." The breezy tone on the other end of the line vanished, replaced by a defensive chill. "Well, I don't know what you expect me to do about it from here, Emily. I give her the cash. I can't be responsible for what she does with it. What could she possibly do with it?" I shot back, my voice rising. "Her bills are paid by direct debit. You do her shopping. She barely leaves the house. Where's the money going?" "I don't know. A secret gambling habit?" Megan laughed, a short, ugly sound. "Honestly, you're being hysterical. I told you, she's forgetful. She probably tucked it away somewhere for safekeeping and can't remember where. I'll have a look for it when I go over tomorrow." "This isn't about forgetfulness." I was practically shouting now, pacing my kitchen. "This is about you. You manage every penny she has. You're the only one with access. The only one. So you tell me, Megan. Where is it?" The line went quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was low and venomous. "You know what I think, Emily? I think you feel guilty. You feel guilty because you swan in here once a week for a cup of tea and a chat, while I'm the one doing the actual work. I'm the one dealing with her doctor's appointments, her prescriptions, her complaining. It's easy for you to sit there in your ivory tower, surrounded by your precious books, and cast judgment. You have no idea what it's like. That has nothing to do with it, and you know it," I said, my voice trembling with rage. "It has everything to do with it. You want to find something wrong? You want to create some drama to make yourself feel more involved. Well, I'm not playing. I have to go." And she hung up. I stood there in the silent kitchen, the disconnected tone buzzing in my ear. The conversation had been even worse than I'd imagined. She had twisted it, turned my concern into an attack, and painted herself as the martyr. It was a masterful, cruel performance, and it told me everything I needed to know. She would never admit it, I would never get the truth from her. If I wanted to protect my mother, I needed proof. Hard, undeniable proof. The next day, I called in sick to the library. My stomach was in such a knot that it wasn't entirely a lie. I waited until I knew Megan would be at her office. A 2-hour window of opportunity. I drove to Margaret's, my heart thumping against my ribs. I felt like a burglar, a trespasser in a house that had always been a second home. "Emily, what a lovely surprise," Margaret said, her face lighting up when she opened the door. The hollow look from the day before was still in her eyes, but she was trying to cover it with a fragile brightness. "I wasn't feeling great, so I took the day off," I lied, forcing a smile. "I thought I'd come and see if you needed anything." "Oh, that's so thoughtful, dear." We made tea and sat at her small kitchen table. I tried to bring up the money gently. "Grandma?" I started, stirring my tea. "About yesterday. Have you found that other money Megan gave you?" She shook her head, her lips pressed together in a thin line. "No, dear." I looked. "Megan came by this morning. She was quite cross with me. She said I must have lost it and that I was being careless." Her gaze dropped to her lap. "She made me feel very foolish." My anger flared again, hot and protective. "You are not foolish." I reached across the table and took her hand. "Grandma, I need to ask you something important. Do you ever see any bank statements? Any letters from the bank?" She looked confused. "No. Megan takes care of all that. She says I don't need to worry my head with paperwork. She brings me the cash I need for the week, and that's that." "Of course." Megan controlled the flow of information completely. "Okay," I said, standing up. "You just relax. I'm going to tidy up a bit for you." It was a flimsy excuse. What I was really doing was searching. I started in the living room, looking through the drawers of the mahogany bureau where Margaret kept her important papers. It was filled with old birthday cards, photographs, her marriage certificate, my grandfather's army records, but nothing recent. No letters from a bank, no statements, not a single official-looking envelope. Megan had been thorough. I felt a rising sense of panic. Maybe there was nothing to find. Maybe Megan was so clever that she'd erased every single trace. I went into the spare bedroom, a room that was mostly used for storage. It was filled with boxes of old clothes and forgotten Christmas decorations. Tucked away in the corner was a small writing desk that had once been mine. Its drawers were filled with my teenage diaries and old school reports. I almost didn't bother looking, but on a desperate whim, I pulled the bottom drawer all the way out. And there, stuck at the very back, was a single folded piece of paper. It was a bank statement. It was dated 3 months ago, so Megan must have missed it. Or perhaps it had arrived before she'd implemented her system of intercepting the post. My hands shook as I unfolded it. I scanned the columns of numbers, my eyes darting back and forth. There were the usual entries: the state pension coming in, the direct debits for the council tax, and the electricity going out. Then I saw it. A series of cash withdrawals from an ATM in a town 20 miles away, a place Margaret never went. And one other item, near the bottom of the page, that made the breath catch in my throat. A debit card payment for over $300 to a designer boutique. The name of the boutique was Megan's Style. The drive from Margaret's house to Megan's was a blur. The bank statement lay on the passenger seat, a flimsy piece of paper that held the weight of our family's rupture. It felt like a toxic object, radioactive with betrayal. Every instinct I had screamed at me to turn back, to find an easier, gentler way to handle this. But I knew there wasn't one. The time for gentle nudges and veiled questions was over. This required the brutal, cleansing force of the truth. Megan lived in a new-build estate on the other side of town, a place of pristine lawns and identical brick houses. It was a world away from the lived-in, slightly chaotic warmth of Margaret's bungalow. Her home, like her life, was a picture of curated perfection. As I pulled into her driveway, I saw her through the large bay window, sitting at her dining table, a laptop open in front of her. She looked up, a flicker of surprise followed by a frown. She clearly wasn't expecting me. I took a deep breath, grabbed the statement, and walked to the front door. It swung open before I could even ring the bell. "Emily, to what do I owe the pleasure?" Megan's voice was dripping with sarcasm. She stood with her arms crossed, blocking the doorway, a gatekeeper to her own sterile castle. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Can I come in?" She hesitated, then gave a theatrical sigh and stepped aside. "I suppose I have a report to finish, so you'll have to make it quick." Her house was immaculate. White walls, gray furniture, not a cushion out of place or a speck of dust in sight. It was less a home and more a showroom. I walked past her into the open-plan living area. I didn't sit down. I turned to face her. the folded paper in my hand. I was at Mum's, I began. I was helping her tidy up. And you decided my doormat was the next stop on your cleaning spree? She scoffed, leaning against the doorframe. I found this, I said, holding out the statement. It was stuck in a drawer. It must have been overlooked. She glanced at it, her expression unreadable. A bank statement. Thrilling. Is there a point to this? I think so, I said, my heart hammering. I think the point is the series of cash withdrawals from the ATM in Northwood. For the first time, a flicker of something, fear, annoyance, crossed her face. Northwood? Where's that? You know where it is, Megan. It's that town with the big outlet mall. The one you love. Mum hasn't been there in her life. She can't even drive. Megan pushed herself off the doorframe and walked towards the kitchen island, not looking at me. She poured herself a glass of water, her movements stiff. She probably gave her card to a friend, one of her church friends. The lie was so bald, so pathetic, it barely registered. It was like a chess player making a move they knew was hopeless. Her church friends are all in their 80s, Megan, and none of them are thieves. I took a step closer, my voice dropping. And I don't think they'd be shopping at a place called Megan's Style. I watched her back. I saw her shoulders tense, the knuckles on the hand holding the glass turn white. She was silent for a long, stretched moment. The only sound was the hum of her expensive stainless steel refrigerator. When she finally turned around, her face was transformed. The mask of cool indifference was gone, replaced by a snarl of pure resentment. "Oh, you think you're so clever, don't you?" she hissed. "You with your dusty books and your sanctimonious attitude. You found a piece of paper. Well, congratulations, Sherlock. It's her pension, Megan. Her money. For her food, her heating, for a new coat for her grandson if she wants to buy him one." "A new coat?" She laughed, a jarring, ugly sound that echoed in the sterile room. "You have no idea what things cost, do you? You have no idea what I do." She took a step towards me, her eyes blazing. "Do you think her pension covers everything? The rising price of her prescriptions? The special food she needs for her digestion? The petrol I use driving back and forth to her house 3-4 times a day? The hours I spend on the phone with the council, with the bank, with the bloody doctor's receptionist?" "So you paid yourself?" I asked, my voice laced with disbelief. "You just decided to help yourself to her savings as a salary?" "I am owed it!" she shrieked, stabbing a finger in my direction. "I am owed something for the last 2 years of my life. While you've been playing happy families and visiting when it suits you, I have been her keeper. I have sacrificed my time, my social life, my sanity. That money is nothing. A drop in the ocean compared to what I've given up. That boutique? Yes. I bought a dress. One dress. The first new thing I've bought myself in over a year. I deserved it. I earned it. The sheer, breathtaking entitlement of it all left me speechless. She wasn't just a thief. She was a thief who believed she was a victim. She had twisted her responsibilities into a narrative of martyrdom, and Margaret's money was her righteous compensation. "You didn't earn it," I said finally, my voice low and shaking with a cold fury. "You stole it. You stole it from an 82-year-old woman who trusts you. Our grandmother. You let her stand in a shop, humiliated, with an empty purse, while you were buying designer clothes with her money." "Oh, spare me the drama," she sneered, turning away again, dismissing me. "It's not like she's going to miss it. She doesn't even know what day it is half the time." That was the final blow. The casual, cruel dismissal of Margaret, not just as a person with rights, but as a person with a mind. In that moment, the sister I had grown up with, the girl I had shared a bedroom and secrets with, vanished completely. She was a stranger to me. A cold, hard stranger who had hollowed out our family from the inside. "I want the money back," I said, the words feeling heavy and final in the air. "Every penny you took. You will transfer it back into her account. And then you will give me all the paperwork. The bank cards, the account details, everything. You are finished managing her affairs." Megan spun back around, her face a mask of fury. "And if I don't?" "If you don't," I said, looking her straight in the eye, "this bank statement and I will be paying a visit to the police, and we'll see how your perfect, curated life looks after that." The threat hung in the air between us, ugly and undeniable. I saw the calculation in her eyes, the frantic whirring of a mind trapped. Her rage was still there, but now it was laced with the cold, sharp tang of fear. She had underestimated me. She had assumed my quiet nature meant I was weak. She had been wrong. Without another word, I turned and walked out of the house, leaving the bank statement on her pristine white countertop. The front door clicked shut behind me, a sound of absolute finality. The bond between us was broken. The war had been declared, and I had just fired the first devastating shot. The days that followed were wrapped in a cold, heavy silence. The storm had passed, leaving behind the wreckage. There were no more furious phone calls, no dramatic confrontations. There was just a quiet, efficient severing of ties, a methodical erasure. 2 days after my visit, a large sum of money appeared in Margaret's bank account. I checked it online, my heart a cold stone in my chest. It was significantly more than I had calculated from the single statement, and I felt a fresh wave of sickness as I realized the theft had been going on for much longer and was much deeper than I had initially uncovered. Each digit in that transfer felt like an admission of a deeper betrayal. An envelope arrived by courier the next day. It was a sterile brown office envelope with Margaret's name and address typed on a label. Inside, there was no letter, no apology, no last desperate plea for understanding. It contained Margaret's bank cards, a new checkbook, and a single sheet of paper on which Megan had typed out all the relevant account numbers and passwords. The precision of it was chilling. It was the cold, impersonal transaction of a disgraced accountant settling a debt, not a sister trying to mend a shattered bond. She was closing a file, not a chapter of our lives. The hardest part was still to come. I had to tell our grandmother. I rehearsed the words in my head 100 times, but no version felt gentle enough. I dreaded it, fearing the knowledge would break her spirit completely, that the truth would be a poison she couldn't survive. I went over on a Saturday morning, armed with a box of her favorite shortbread and a heart full of trepidation. She was in her armchair, a book lying open in her lap. We sat in her living room, the grandfather clock in the hall ticking a steady, indifferent rhythm in the quiet space. I didn't use the word stole. I couldn't bring myself to be that blunt, that cruel. I explained as gently as I could that Megan had been having some severe financial difficulties and had borrowed some money from Margaret's account without asking. The word borrowed tasted like a lie in my mouth. I told her that she had been struggling with the pressure of looking after things and had made a terrible mistake. I explained that the money had now been paid back in full, and that I would be helping with her finances from now on to take the weight off. Margaret listened, her hands folded calmly in her lap. Her gaze was fixed on a photograph on the mantelpiece, a picture of Megan and me as children, all missing teeth and matching floral dresses, our arms slung around each other's shoulders, an image from a time when love was simple. When I finished, the silence she held was heavier than any I had ever known. I watched a single tear form and trace a slow path down her wrinkled cheek. She didn't sob or cry out. Her grief was a quiet, profound, and dignified thing. "Poor Megan," she finally whispered, her voice as fragile as a dried leaf. She was always so proud, so afraid of failing. Even as a little girl, she would hide her school papers if they weren't perfect. Her capacity for compassion, for seeing the frightened child inside the woman who had so profoundly betrayed her, was astounding. It was a grace I knew I would never possess. In that moment, my anger towards my sister finally dissolved, and in its place was only a vast, empty sadness for what she had become, and for the family she had broken. Life settled into a new, tentative rhythm. I set up online banking for Margaret, and we'd go through the statements together every week at her kitchen table, a mug of tea between us. At first, she was hesitant, waving it away as, "Your job now, dear," but I insisted. "It's your money, Grandma," I'd say gently. "You should know where it is." Slowly, she began to take an interest, pointing at a direct debit and asking what it was for, a flicker of her old, sharp self returning. I took over the weekly shop, and Sam made it his personal mission to ensure her biscuit tin was never empty, often leaving a silly drawing on a napkin for her to find. We never saw Megan. She didn't call. She didn't visit. Through a cousin, I heard she had sold her house and moved away, seeking a fresh start in a town where no one knew her or what she had done. I wrestled with the idea of going to the police, but I couldn't. The money was back, and Margaret was safe. Exposing my sister publicly felt like a second violation, another wound our family didn't need. Her punishment was the exile she had chosen for herself, a life lived in the shadow of her own bitter resentment. One bright spring afternoon, about a year later, I was in Margaret's garden with her, helping her plant new rose bushes. Sam was there, digging enthusiastically in the soil, his face smeared with dirt, presenting every worm he found to us with immense pride. Margaret was directing the operation from her garden chair, her voice full of its old, familiar authority. "A little to the left, Emily," she instructed, pointing with her trowel. "It needs the morning sun." I shifted the bush, patting the rich, dark earth down around its roots. The sun was warm on my back and the air smelled of damp soil and new beginnings. Sam laughed as a worm wriggled over his hand, a pure, happy sound that filled the garden. I looked at my grandmother, her face relaxed and happy in the sunshine, and I saw her. Not a frail old woman, not a victim, but the resilient, unbreakable heart of our family, still beating strong. We had lost something, yes. A part of our family story had been irrevocably torn away, leaving a scar. But we had survived. We had found our way back to the truth, and here, in the gentle sunshine, we were planting a new garden in its place.